The millionaire, who had lived a life of luxury for years, felt an emptiness that his wealth could never fill. He had everything anyone could want: a sprawling mansion, expensive cars, the best clothes, and a life of ease. But as time went on, he began to feel disconnected from the world. He saw the struggles of the poor on the news, but it all seemed so distant. He realized that his wealth had created a bubble around him, keeping him from truly understanding what others were going through. One day, a thought crossed his mind. What if he could step outside his bubble and experience life as someone who had to work hard every day just to survive? What if he could see the world from the perspective of those who lived without the luxury he took for granted? It was a bold idea, but one that seemed necessary if he wanted to break free from the numbness he had been feeling. With that thought, he made up his mind. He decided to disguise himself and walk among the people in a poor neighborhood. He would leave behind his expensive clothes, his high-end watch, and his flashy car. Instead, he put on simple clothes: an old jacket, faded jeans, and a cap pulled low over his face. He practiced speaking in a more ordinary tone and walked with a humble air, hoping no one would recognize him. At first, everything felt strange. The millionaire, who was used to being greeted with respect and admiration, now found himself invisible. No one paid him any special attention as he wandered through the streets. He watched as people went about their daily lives, some working long hours in small shops, others waiting in line for basic necessities, and many struggling just to get by. He felt a mix of emotions: curiosity, sadness, and even a touch of guilt as he observed their lives up close. As he walked through the neighborhood, he saw the tough realities people faced: families living in cramped apartments, children playing in the streets with little to no supervision, and parents working multiple jobs just to make sure their kids had enough to eat. He noticed how kind the people were to each other, always sharing what little they had, whether it was a cup of tea or a kind word. There was a sense of unity among them, despite the challenges they faced. The millionaire couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for these people. They didn't have much, but they made the most of what they had. They smiled and laughed together, even when times were hard. As he continued to walk, he realized that he had been so focused on his own success for so long that he had lost sight of what really mattered: the small moments of kindness, the community spirit, and the strength people had to keep going, even in the face of hardship. By the end of the day, the millionaire was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. He had walked for hours, trying to immerse himself in this new reality, but he couldn't help feeling overwhelmed by the weight of what he had witnessed. His mind was racing with thoughts about how different his life was compared to theirs. It was then that he realized how little he truly knew about the struggles people faced every day. It was a humbling experience that left him questioning everything he had once believed about wealth and success. As night fell, he returned to his apartment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for his own life. But he also knew that he couldn't go back to his old ways of living without understanding more about the people he had just met. This was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything for him. The millionaire woke up the next morning, still feeling the weight of the previous day's experiences. He had seen the struggles of the people in the neighborhood, and he couldn't shake the images from his mind. It was one thing to read about poverty in books or watch it on the news, but it was something entirely different to see it firsthand. The faces of the people he met kept replaying in his thoughts, each person with their own story, their own dreams, and their own fight for a better life. As he made his way back to the neighborhood, he couldn't help but feel a mix of nervousness and determination. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he knew that he had to understand more. He needed to hear their stories and learn what life was truly like for those who lived with so little. His first stop was a small corner shop run by a woman named Maria. She was in her late 30s with tired eyes that spoke of years of hard work. She had a warm smile, despite the long hours she spent behind the counter, selling food and household items to the locals. The millionaire struck up a conversation with her, pretending to be a regular customer. He asked her about her day and what it was like running the shop. Maria was quick to open up, telling him about the challenges she faced. She worked from early in the morning until late at night, barely making enough to keep the shop afloat. She had 2 young children, and she barely had enough time to spend with them, let alone provide them with everything they needed. Yet despite everything, Maria was incredibly proud of what she had built. She spoke about the community she had become a part of and how they all helped each other out when times got tough. Listening to her, the millionaire realized that Maria wasn't just a shopkeeper. She was the backbone of her family and her community. She had built something out of nothing, and it was clear that her strength came from the love and support she gave to others. He felt a deep respect for her resilience, her ability to keep going no matter the odds. Later that day, the millionaire walked further into the neighborhood, where he met an older man named Samuel. Samuel lived alone in a small, modest house and spent most of his days sitting on his porch, watching the world go by. When the millionaire spoke to him, he learned that Samuel had worked as a construction worker for most of his life. Now, with bad knees and a bad back, Samuel was retired, but the money he had saved over the years was barely enough to cover his basic needs. Despite his own struggles, Samuel was always willing to lend a hand to others. He told the millionaire stories of helping neighbors with repairs, watching kids when their parents were away, and sharing his meager meals with those who needed it. To Samuel, helping others was as natural as breathing. It was this spirit of community that had kept him going through tough times. As the millionaire listened, he began to see the power of human connection in a whole new light. He realized that it wasn't just about surviving in a difficult world. It was about creating bonds, offering support, and lifting each other up. The people he had met had so little, yet they were willing to give so much. It was humbling, and it made him question the way he had been living his own life. He had always believed that success was measured by how much wealth one could accumulate, but now he was beginning to understand that true success was about something far deeper: compassion, kindness, and the ability to make a difference in the lives of others. By the end of the day, the millionaire felt changed. He had witnessed the beauty of the human spirit, even in the face of hardship. The people in this community had something he had never experienced: a sense of purpose that came not from material wealth, but from the bonds they shared and the love they gave to one another. This new perspective was a gift, one that would shape his journey from this point forward. The millionaire continued his journey through the neighborhood, feeling a sense of deep admiration for the people he had met. Each encounter had left an impression on him, but it was one particular moment that would change his entire outlook on life. As he walked down a narrow street, he noticed a family gathered outside their small apartment. The father, a man in his early 40s, stood with his wife and 2 children, looking distressed. There was a pile of their belongings scattered around, and a sense of uncertainty hung in the air. Curious, the millionaire approached them and struck up a conversation. The father explained that they were being evicted. Despite working long hours at a local factory, they had fallen behind on rent due to unexpected medical bills. The landlord, unwilling to give them any more time, had decided to force them out. The family had no place to go, and their future seemed uncertain. The millionaire felt a wave of empathy wash over him. He knew that feeling of uncertainty, but he had never had to face such dire consequences. He also realized that for this family, losing their home wasn't just a setback. It was a complete upheaval of their entire lives. The children, oblivious to the full scope of the situation, continued to play in the street, unaware of the weight their parents carried. Feeling helpless yet compelled to do something, the millionaire made a decision. Without revealing his true identity, he made his way to the landlord's office. He knew the man was demanding the rent immediately, and there was no time to waste. With an air of quiet confidence, he spoke to the landlord, explaining that the family was in a difficult situation and asking for more time. However, the landlord was unmoved, insisting that the rent be paid or the family would have to leave. At that moment, the millionaire realized that he needed to do more than just ask. He had the means to solve this problem, and it was time to act. He left the landlord's office and immediately went to the bank, where he withdrew a substantial amount of money. Returning to the landlord's office, he handed over the money in full, ensuring that the family would not be evicted. He also made it clear that the family would have no further issues with their rent payments. The landlord, taken aback by the gesture, reluctantly agreed to let the family stay. The millionaire left the office with a feeling of quiet satisfaction, knowing he had made a real difference in the lives of people who were struggling to survive. When the millionaire returned to the family's apartment, he watched as the father's eyes widened in surprise when he saw the money. The family could hardly believe what was happening. Their worries had vanished in an instant, and the children, who had been anxious about what would happen to them, were now laughing and playing again. The millionaire didn't reveal his identity. He simply smiled and walked away, knowing that he had done the right thing. Later that evening, as he reflected on the experience, the millionaire couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. He had witnessed the incredible power of kindness, and it had made a lasting impression on him. The simple act of helping someone in need had brought a sense of peace to his soul. It was a feeling he had never experienced with all the wealth he had accumulated over the years. For the first time, he understood what truly mattered in life: connection, compassion, and the willingness to lift others up, no matter their circumstances. As the days went by, the millionaire continued to walk among the poor, but now with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He was part of the community. He began to see how even the smallest acts of kindness could create a ripple effect, spreading hope and positivity. In the end, he realized that true wealth wasn't measured by how much money one had. It was measured by how much love, kindness, and generosity one shared with others. And in that moment, the millionaire found a new purpose in life, one that would forever change the way he saw the world. As the millionaire continued his time in the neighborhood, he found himself becoming more deeply involved in the lives of the people around him. No longer just an observer, he began to feel a sense of connection and responsibility to those he had met. It was an unexpected transformation, and he started realizing that the more he helped, the more rewarding it became. He was no longer concerned with impressing others or living up to an image of success. Instead, he was learning to value the quiet moments of compassion that often went unnoticed in the rush of daily life. One afternoon, as he walked down a narrow alley, he noticed a man sitting on the curb. He looked tired, his clothes worn and dirty from the day's labor. The millionaire approached him, offering a friendly smile. The man, who introduced himself as James, was a construction worker, just like many others in the neighborhood. James explained that he worked long hours in the heat, doing hard manual labor to make enough money to feed his family. Despite his efforts, it never seemed to be enough, and his children often went without basic necessities. James' words hit the millionaire hard. The idea that a hard-working person could still struggle to make ends meet was something he had never fully understood before. He listened intently as James spoke about his family, his dreams for a better life, and the daily challenges he faced. James' determination to keep going, despite everything, made the millionaire realize just how much strength it took to survive in a world where everything felt stacked against you. As their conversation continued, the millionaire asked if there was anything he could do to help. James was hesitant at first, clearly not used to accepting help from anyone. But after some encouragement, he finally mentioned that his son needed new shoes for school. His old ones were falling apart, and James simply couldn't afford to buy him a new pair. It seemed like such a small request, but the millionaire could see the weight it carried. A new pair of shoes would mean the world to James' son, who had been embarrassed about his old, worn-out ones. The millionaire, moved by the story, offered to buy the shoes. James was reluctant, but the millionaire insisted. It wasn't just about the shoes. It was about showing James that someone cared, that he wasn't invisible in the world. The next day, the millionaire went to a nearby store and bought a brand new pair of shoes for James' son. He returned to James' house, where the young boy was playing outside, and handed him the shoes. When James saw the shoes, his eyes filled with gratitude. He couldn't believe that someone had gone out of their way to help his family, especially without expecting anything in return. He tried to refuse the gift at first, but the millionaire simply smiled and told him it was his pleasure. For the first time in a long while, James felt a sense of relief. He knew his son would walk proudly to school the next day, no longer embarrassed by the state of his shoes. As the millionaire walked away from their home, he felt a warmth in his chest. The simple act of giving had brought so much joy to a family that had so little. He realized that this was what he had been missing in his life: the connection, the shared humanity, the joy of helping others without any expectations. It wasn't about the money he had, but the way he chose to use it. Every small act of kindness, no matter how simple, had the power to change someone's day, their outlook, and perhaps even their life. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt truly rich, not because of his bank account, but because of the joy he had given and received. He knew that there was so much more he could do, and he began to make it his mission to continue helping the community in any way he could. His time among the poor had opened his eyes to a world he had never fully understood, and now he was determined to make a difference. As the days passed, the millionaire found himself immersed in the rhythm of daily life in the neighborhood. His initial hesitation had faded, and he was becoming a familiar face to the people who lived there. He had been welcomed in a way that surprised him, as if they sensed his sincerity in wanting to understand their world. He no longer felt like an outsider looking in. He was slowly becoming part of their community. One morning, as he walked down the street, he noticed a small group of people gathered around a corner. Curious, he approached to see what was going on. There, in the middle of the crowd, stood an elderly man, bent with age, trying to fix a broken cart that was used to carry goods. The wheels had come off, and the cart was lying useless in the middle of the road. The man was struggling to lift it by himself, and it was clear that his frail body couldn't handle the weight of the cart anymore. The people around him were offering advice, but no one seemed to have the skills to actually help him. The millionaire, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward without hesitation. Without saying a word, he knelt down beside the elderly man and began to help him lift the cart. It wasn't a difficult task for someone who was in good shape, but for the elderly man, it might have been impossible. As they worked together, the crowd around them slowly began to disperse, but the millionaire remained focused on the task at hand. The elderly man's face lit up with gratitude as the cart was finally back in working condition. He thanked the millionaire several times, his voice full of emotion. When the cart was finally repaired, the elderly man smiled and asked, "Why did you help me? You're a stranger here." The millionaire, a bit surprised by the question, simply answered, "Because we're all part of the same community. We help each other." The elderly man nodded, clearly moved by the response. It was a simple exchange, but it held so much more meaning than the millionaire had realized. In that moment, he understood something important. Helping others wasn't about grand gestures or donations. It was about being there for someone when they needed it, no matter how small the task seemed. That's what made a community strong: the willingness to pitch in, no matter who you were or where you came from. Later that day, the millionaire found himself thinking about the elderly man and the small act of kindness they had shared. It was a reminder of the power of human connection. In his world, where everything had always been transactional, he had never truly experienced something like this. No one had ever done something for him simply out of kindness, and he realized how much that small act had meant to him. He also thought about how much pride the elderly man had in his work, even though he was struggling. The man hadn't asked for help. He had been trying to fix the cart on his own, refusing to show any weakness. It made the millionaire realize how proud people could be, even when they had so little. That sense of pride, of holding onto your dignity in the face of adversity, was something the wealthy could never fully understand unless they experienced it firsthand. As the days turned into weeks, the millionaire began to take more active roles in the community. He helped with repairs, carried groceries for the elderly, and volunteered his time to assist in any way he could. Each time he offered help, the people responded with thanks and kindness. But what struck him most was how much they appreciated the simple act of giving. It wasn't about money or status. It was about showing up, being present, and offering what little you could. These moments made him feel more fulfilled than any lavish dinner or luxury experience ever had. It was clear to the millionaire, now that the wealth he had once prized had little to do with true happiness. What mattered most was the impact he could have on others, the difference he could make in their lives. He had once thought that his success was defined by his bank balance, but now he understood that true success was measured by the love and respect you earned through your actions. In the quiet moments of reflection, the millionaire realized he was no longer the same person he had been before. He had found a new purpose, one that had nothing to do with accumulating wealth and everything to do with building connections and helping others. His life had taken on a new meaning, and for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The millionaire had been living in the neighborhood for a few weeks now, and he had truly begun to feel like part of the community. As he continued to help the people around him, his understanding of what really mattered deepened. It was no longer just about the physical tasks, like fixing a broken cart or buying someone a meal. It was about forming meaningful connections. He had learned that sometimes just being there for someone, listening to their story, or sharing a moment of understanding could make all the difference in their day. One afternoon, he decided to visit a local park that was often frequented by the children of the neighborhood. He had noticed how they played in the open space, laughing and running without a care in the world. But as he arrived, he saw something that caught his attention. A young girl sitting on a bench by herself, looking out at the playground with a sad expression. She seemed out of place, her usual joy replaced by a quiet sadness. Curious, the millionaire walked over to her and sat down on the bench. He introduced himself, and after a few moments, the girl slowly began to open up. Her name was Lucy, and she was around 11 years old. She told him that her family had recently fallen on hard times, and she had been forced to move to the neighborhood with her mother and younger brother. The change had been difficult for her. She missed her old friends and the school she had attended, and she felt like she didn't belong here. The millionaire listened intently, feeling a pang of sympathy for her. He could understand the feeling of displacement. Even though he had everything, he had often felt disconnected from the world around him. He could see that Lucy's sadness wasn't just about missing her old home. It was about feeling like she had been uprooted from everything she knew and loved. As they talked, the millionaire asked Lucy if there was anything he could do to help her feel more at home. Lucy was hesitant at first, unsure of what he meant, but after some gentle encouragement, she mentioned that she had always loved painting, but had lost the opportunity to do so after they moved. She had left behind her art supplies and hadn't been able to afford new ones. Her love for painting had been her way of expressing herself, and without it, she felt like a part of her was missing. The millionaire immediately felt moved by her words. He realized that sometimes people just needed the space to pursue what brought them joy. He promised Lucy that he would do something about it. The next day, he went to an art supply store and bought a full set of paints, brushes, and canvases. When he returned, he handed the supplies to Lucy, telling her that he hoped it would help her find her way back to the happiness she had once known. Lucy's eyes lit up with surprise and excitement. She could hardly believe it. The simple act of providing her with the tools to create again made her feel like she had been given a new chance. She thanked the millionaire, but there was no need for more words. The joy on her face spoke volumes. As the days went by, Lucy began to paint again, pouring her emotions onto the canvas with every stroke. The millionaire continued to check in on her, seeing how she was progressing and offering encouragement. Slowly, he began to notice a change in her. She was no longer sitting alone on the bench, her face clouded with sadness. Instead, she was playing with the other children, her laughter returning as she shared her artwork with them. Her paintings brought the community together, and the neighbors admired her talent. One evening, As Lucy finished a painting of the park where she had spent so many lonely hours, she handed it to the millionaire. It was a vibrant, colorful representation of the place that had once felt so foreign to her. The trees, the playground, and the sky were all brought to life in a way that captured her unique perspective of the world. The painting was a testament to how far she had come since that first conversation with the millionaire. The millionaire took the painting in his hands, feeling the deep sense of pride in what Lucy had accomplished. He realized that sometimes the simplest gifts, like a few art supplies, could have the power to change a life. It wasn't about giving people money or solving all their problems. It was about offering them the tools to find joy and purpose again. As he walked away that evening, the millionaire thought about how much he had learned from Lucy. She had shown him the importance of nurturing creativity and the power of giving people the opportunity to express themselves. In helping her rediscover her passion for painting, he had helped her rebuild a part of herself that she thought had been lost forever. The experience reminded him that true fulfillment wasn't found in wealth or material possessions. It was found in the simple, meaningful connections we make with others and the impact we can have on their lives. The days continued to pass, and the millionaire's time in the neighborhood was changing him in ways he hadn't anticipated. As he spent more time with the people, he felt more connected to them. And the stark difference between his old life and his current one became clearer with each passing day. His initial curiosity had turned into a genuine desire to learn more, to truly understand the world he had been blind to for so long. He began to see life through a different lens, one that focused not on material wealth or status, but on kindness, community, and the shared human experience. One evening, as he sat on a worn bench near a small cafe, watching the sunset over the city, a familiar face approached him. It was Maria, the shopkeeper he had met earlier, the one who ran the corner store. She smiled as she sat beside him, a bag of groceries in her hand. "Are you enjoying the neighborhood?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. The millionaire smiled back, feeling the warmth in his chest that wasn't there before. "More than I ever expected," he said honestly. "It's been a real eye-opener." Maria looked at him thoughtfully, then began to share her own story, as she often did with him. She spoke of the difficulties she had faced over the years, how she had worked hard to build her small business from the ground up, how she had raised her children mostly on her own, and how she had always done her best to make sure others didn't go hungry. It was a life of sacrifice, but Maria never complained. She spoke about how grateful she was for the simple things, the laughter of her children, the friendships she had formed, and the sense of purpose she had in her work. Listening to her, the millionaire realized just how much he had taken for granted in his own life. Maria had lived through hardships he could never truly understand, but instead of bitterness, she had a quiet strength. There was no trace of resentment in her words, only a deep sense of gratitude for the little moments that made her life meaningful. As their conversation continued, the millionaire asked her about her dreams, something he had never thought to ask anyone before. He was genuinely interested in knowing more about what she hoped for, beyond the daily struggle. Maria paused for a moment before answering. "I dream of one day having a bigger store," she said, "one where I can hire more people from the neighborhood, help more families, and make sure no one has to worry about where their next meal will come from." Her words stuck with him. It wasn't just about surviving for Maria. It was about lifting others up, about creating opportunities for people to thrive. She didn't want success for herself alone. She wanted to build something that could help the community she loved. The millionaire, moved by her words, asked, "What can I do to help?" Maria looked at him, almost surprised by the question. She hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. After all, she wasn't used to asking for help, much less from someone like him. But after a few moments of silence, she smiled softly. "Well, I suppose you could help by buying some more of my products," she said with a teasing smile. "But in all seriousness, just being here, talking to me, listening, it's more than enough." Her answer made the millionaire feel something shift inside him. He realized that sometimes the most valuable thing you can give isn't money or material goods. Sometimes it's simply being present for someone, giving them the space to be heard, and showing them that they matter. That night, as he lay in bed, reflecting on his conversation with Maria, he thought about the power of human connection. His life had been full of luxury and comfort, but none of that had ever given him the sense of fulfillment he now felt. He had been so focused on his own success and wealth, but he was beginning to understand that true fulfillment came from making a difference in the lives of others, whether it was through acts of kindness, offering a listening ear, or helping someone achieve their dreams, however small. The millionaire had come to realize that his own sense of purpose was tied to something much deeper than wealth. His journey through the neighborhood had shown him the power of community, the strength in helping others, and the joy of giving without expecting anything in return. As he continued his time in the neighborhood, he knew that his journey wasn't over. There was so much more to learn, so many more lives to touch. But for the first time in years, he felt at peace. He had found something far more valuable than money. He had found a sense of belonging, a purpose, and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in life. And it was all because he had dared to step outside his comfort zone and walk in someone else's shoes, even if only for a short while. The millionaire had spent weeks in the neighborhood, and with each passing day, he found himself more deeply connected to the people around him. His perspective on life had shifted in ways he couldn't have imagined. He no longer saw the world through the lens of wealth and status, but through the lens of shared humanity. The people he had met were no longer just strangers. They were individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams just like his own. One evening, as the sun began to set and the cool breeze swept through the streets, he walked past the small cafe where he had first met Maria. It was quiet now, the cafe slowly closing for the night. As he walked, he saw a familiar figure sitting on the curb outside, her tired face lit by the fading light. It was Lucy, the young girl whose passion for painting had blossomed once again. She was sitting with a sketchbook in her lap, quietly drawing the scene before her, her fingers moving gracefully across the paper, capturing the world in a way only she could. He approached her gently, not wanting to interrupt her peaceful moment. When she saw him, she smiled and waved him over. "I was just finishing this," she said, showing him her sketch. The drawing was of the very street they were standing on, but it was more than just a simple scene. It was filled with emotion. There was a sense of life in the way she had captured the trees swaying in the breeze, the light casting long shadows across the pavement, and the people walking by, each one a small part of the story she was telling. The millionaire stood in awe of her work, not because it was a masterpiece, but because it was a true reflection of the world through her eyes. "You've come a long way," he said softly, sitting down next to her. Lucy nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I never thought I would feel this way again. After everything that happened, I didn't think I could ever be happy here. But this place, it's different. It's where I found my voice." The millionaire smiled, feeling a sense of pride for Lucy, though he knew he hadn't done much. He had just given her the space to rediscover her passion. The true credit went to her strength and determination. He realized that sometimes the best thing you could do for someone wasn't to change their world, but to give them the tools and encouragement to change it themselves. As they sat together in silence, the millionaire felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had walked into this neighborhood as an outsider, someone looking for answers, someone who thought he could help fix problems with money or charity. But now he understood that the most important thing was to listen, to care, and to offer your time. The relationships he had built here weren't about handouts. They were about mutual respect and shared experiences. Later that week, he decided it was time to leave. He had learned so much from the people he had met, and while he knew he couldn't stay forever, he also knew he would never forget the lessons he had learned. The millionaire didn't want to return to his old life, to his mansion or his extravagant lifestyle. Instead, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He would use his wealth to give back to the community in a way that mattered. He would invest in local businesses, fund education programs for children like Lucy, and support small initiatives that helped people lift themselves up. On his last day, the community gathered at the small park to say goodbye. It was a humble gathering, but it was filled with warmth and gratitude. The people who had once been strangers to him now felt like family. They had shown him what it meant to truly live, to understand the value of hard work, kindness, and community. As the millionaire left, he knew he was a changed man. He had walked among the poor, and in doing so, he had learned more about himself and the world than he could have ever imagined. His time in the neighborhood had been a gift, one that had opened his eyes to the richness of life that money could never buy. And as he moved forward, he carried with him the lessons of the people he had met, the lessons of love, resilience, and the importance of making a difference, no matter how small.